We are going to move on to our second statement, and the theme here is going to be HR trends. How could I not? As 2024 is just around the corner, HR trends articles are starting to pop up again. One of the trends identified for next year by the Academy to Innovate HR is the end of BS jobs. This is a term introduced a decade ago by David Graeber. He talked about socially useless and thus, in his words, bullshit jobs. Research shows that 37% of British working adults believe their job is not making a meaningful contribution to the world. Another, more extensive study covering 47 countries found that 17% of workers are doubtful about the usefulness of their job. With changing employee expectations, flatter organizational structures, and fewer middle managers with larger spans of control, BS jobs are back on the agenda. And HR is uniquely positioned and has access to all the tools needed to get rid of BS jobs while still ensuring gainful and meaningful employment. And that brings us to the next statement, which is 2024 will mark the end of BS jobs. Virgile, do you vote yes or do you vote no?
There'll be a no, but from me on this one.
Okay. Suzanne, what do you vote?
I am also voting no, but because I have questions about BS jobs.
All right. Cool. Virgile, I will start with you.
Yep. So I think there's a huge no, like 2024 won't be meaningfully different than previous years. So that's why I start with no, especially because I believe in a lot of ways, large organizations, including states, including countries, right, work in a way that there's inherent inefficiency in those organizations that leads to jobs being done twice, useless jobs and so on. And I don't think in 2024 that will change in any way. But I think the biggest way to cut down on those number of jobs is in the future is AI coming into play, right? AI coming into play and removing a lot of administrative burden or inefficiency from organization, or being able to come into organization and suggest improvements will be the biggest driver for changes in the next few years or decades. So in a way, I'm a lot more hopeful about the disparition of BS jobs in the next few years than I was a year ago prior to the emergence of generative AI. However, will that change in 2024? Not at all.
Okay, thank you. Suzanne, you had questions as well.
I do have questions because what is a meaningful job? Is that something that is meaningful to me or meaningful to community? Because I'll tell you who has one of the most important jobs in the whole world are the garbage men. And it's always men. I've never seen a woman do it. So that is my sexist thing, but it's always men. I am sure they don't go home and say, my job brings so much meaning. But the world literally falls apart without them. I have been in Greece when the garbage men went on strike. It was disgusting and just garbage everywhere. And it really said, okay, this is a meaningful job. But when they ask that question, how are people answering that? So, or is it like, my job isn't meaningful because I'm a middle manager and I basically just stamp what you did and pass it on to the next guy. Whereas I think that person who's making good money and highly educated is probably like, yes, what I do is very important. So I think I need a tighter definition around what BS jobs there are, because I would argue that the garbage man is super, super critical and that middle manager is not, but I don't know how they voted in that survey, how they identified themselves. And maybe I'm completely wrong. And it was all the middle managers that said, yeah, my job is kind of dumb. And all the garbage men were like, I'm doing this great thing. Maybe that's my bias and my prejudice showing forth. I just know that I love the garbage men more than anything else because they keep my city clean, and I live in Switzerland and we like clean here.
Yeah.
I think that our younger generations, our younger millennials and our Gen Zs, they talk a lot about wanting meaning, but they're also looking at it from other places in their life, which I think is good. I don't think it's good to have all of your meaning tied up in your job. So you have this lazy girl job movement, and that's not me being sexist, like with the garbage men. That's the name that this movement named themselves.
Can you perhaps briefly, because I've heard about it as well, because we talk about it in our HR trends about the lazy girl movement as well, but perhaps for people who are listening or watching and they're not familiar with the movement. Yeah.
So the idea of a lazy girl job, and again, I didn't come up with that name. It's called a lazy person job, a lazy human job. It's a low stress job where you make enough money. We go back to our first question. You make enough money to support yourself and the lifestyle that you want, but you don't have stress. You're working 9 to 5 or whatever. Ideally, you're working from home and you're not going to put in that extra mile. Because my generation is the idea is if I want to succeed, I'm going to do my job plus. And I'm going to do more and I'm going to volunteer. I want to be on that committee. I want to take that stretch assignment. And the lazy girl job idea is this job is good. I'm going to do it. I'm not going to put any extra. And there's this whole TikTok movement and there's a bunch of people that advocate for it. And they're all about that work-life balance and finding meaning and all of that. But again, these are white-collar educated people that have these lazy girl jobs that are making good money. What they also don't seem to understand is that at some point they're going to be whining, why am I not getting promoted? Well, because you're lazy.
Okay.
That's why. So that was a long way to get to the BS jobs.
Yeah.
So people are saying they want to do away with them. They want jobs that are meaningful. Other people are finding meaning in other places in their life, which is a good thing. But I just can't agree on what the definition of is. And Virgil said, getting rid of those jobs that don't add purpose, especially in a country like France that has strong employment protections. You can't just say, oh, we're going to get rid of everybody that isn't meaningful. You can do that in America. You can do that in Switzerland with 3 months notice. In America, you need 30 seconds notice. You can just get rid of them. But companies aren't doing that somewhat, although we did see that in Silicon Valley. Like Elon Musk cut a gazillion jobs at Twitter and everybody said Twitter is going to die and it hasn't died. And I'm an avid Twitter user and it's pretty much the same. We got rid of more than half of the people there. Were those people doing meaningful jobs? My guess is no, they weren't and they're gone. So maybe yes.
Maybe yes, yeah. Maybe yes to the statement.
But I don't get the BS job definition. So
no, I think you raise a really good point here though when we talk about and also who is actually gonna decide what a meaningful job is and what isn't a meaningful job, and how is that being decided? And I agree that we do not have that information from the context that I was giving to both of you. Personally, I was working in finance over 10 years ago. I was sitting in a bank all day with 3 screens in front of my face. And I felt like I was doing a BS job, to be honest, and that it was completely meaningless. But somebody else may actually really enjoy that and think that they are doing the best job in the world and actively contributing something to society. So there's a very subjective element to the whole meaninglessness. Virgile, were you going to say something?
Yeah, I was about to say, I don't think it's a zero-sum game in a way that if you line up everyone's ultimate goal when it comes to having a purpose in life and what role should carry that purpose, I'm not sure there's an exact match of role waiting for them. So there will always be people feeling that they're not actually delivering the value that they would like to deliver on the world. So I think in a way, and Suzanne is right, when you talk about BS jobs, I took it with my definition of job that lack impact or are not adding meaningful value to the world or to society or to a corporation. But when you talk about purpose and feeling that a job is a BS job because I don't find any purpose into it, and I don't think we'll ever find a way that everyone will find a role and a company aligned with their desire when it comes to having a purpose. So in that way, I think maybe I'm pessimistic, but there'll always be people misaligned in terms of what they're doing and what they love to do.
Yeah, I think so too. So then perhaps one thing to wrap this statement up with, because we are talking about BS jobs, we are talking about HR. A lot of people, they may feel they are actually feeling that they're doing a BS job. do we, as HR practitioners, can we do something about that?
I think one of the big problems that most businesses have, and maybe I shouldn't use most, but I truly believe this, is that once you reach a certain number of employees, people don't understand how their tasks fit into the whole picture. And so, like, you were sitting behind a screen and you had 3 monitors, which I would love 3 monitors. I'm going to go buy 3 monitors. And you didn't feel fulfilled. But maybe what you were doing was really critical to the business overall goals and was making their clients really happy. So therefore, it was part of a fulfilling thing. But we don't often understand that. And this is one of the problems with remote work as well. There was an article in the Wall Street Journal a few weeks ago about how businesses are finding it really tough to integrate people into their company when they're working remotely. Because when you're working in an office and you see people like, hey, Virgil, how are you doing? Right? So you're a compensation guy, right? And I'm also in HR, but I'm doing employee relations. Okay. Someone may come to me and say, I don't think I'm making enough money, but otherwise our worlds don't cross a lot, even though we're at the same company. And if we're working remotely, the most I might do is send an email to you. Hey, Virgil, this guy doesn't think he's making enough money. Can you take a look at his job description? Whatever. But if we're in the office, I know you. I know you're a friendly guy. You know about my obnoxious cats. I know about whatever it is I know about you. We watch the same show on Netflix and we have a relationship. And sometimes you're like, oh my gosh, I'm so tired of these people asking for their jobs to be revamped. Don't you know that the market hasn't changed in 6, whatever it is, it gives me this broader impact of what you do, what I do. When we're all at home, we only communicate with people we have to communicate with. We don't have these relationships. Nobody knows what marketing is doing if they're in finance, right? And so there's that problem within finding meaning because I don't know how what I do impacts the company as a whole.
That's a good point, I think. Virgile, were you going to say something?
All good outline that I think remote shifts more the roles into task-based rather than like role and big picture based. That's what Susan says. I think I fully agree with it. And I see it as an issue in a lot of organizations, including ours. That's a hybrid organization. It made a lot of sense.
Yeah. And I think this is a nice takeaway as well to take from this second statement. So first of all, 2024 will not mark the end of BS jobs. But I think the second thing here, especially for HR practitioners to take away from this, is that to really keep in mind the importance of making people understand what their contribution is to the whole, to the business and what the business is trying to achieve. I think that's a really valid point. And that definitely helps people feel that what they're doing is not useless or perhaps just a little bit less useless.